that there is an opportunity here for some reconciliation and that the process really had begun. How do you respond to the argument that at this point in time, we're not talking about reintegration, which is a much more gradual process. We're talking about something which resembles some kind of a bargain, a grand bargain, if you will. What would be the motive on the part of the Taliban leadership? And we're not even talking here about the Haqqani group or Gulbuddin. Those are separate, presumably separate negotiations if they're going to occur. But what is the motive that would, or the incentive, I should say, what was the incentive at this point in time when what you've described is a circumstances in which the Taliban has the momentum, has the initiative? Our experience with negotiating with them back in the late 90s and before 2001 was that they always felt they had time on their side. So what would it be, and why should we accept any kind of proposition that they are prepared to separate themselves from Al-Qaeda and other jihadi organizations when it has served their purposes until this time?
Well, lots and lots of things in this statement. I think we've never suggested that a grand bargain or a negotiation would be in any kind of way swift or sudden. If you look at other insurgency wars and how they have come to an end through negotiations, this is a long, drawn-out process and a very complicated one, and most times and always happens behind closed doors, mostly while fighting is ongoing. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because it's something that always kind of burns under my fingernails when people tell me the relationship between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. There are a lot of very, very prominent policymakers and commentators who always like to put everything into the same basket, and they're talking right now that the Taliban leadership has merged with Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban of Afghanistan and Pakistan is the same group, and they all want to come and attack the world. I have very little understanding where this idea comes from. It's very ahistorical in terms of who these groups are, that there has been a cohesiveness, that they have been fighting along the same lines is true, but that is an alliance of convenience rather than an alliance of ideology or an alliance of like having the same ultimate goals. We're currently conducting a research study exactly looking into the linkages between the Taliban movement and Al-Qaeda and its various affiliates. And these are just from where they come from, what their beliefs are, very, very different people. They are sitting in the same region right now, and they have common interests. But we shouldn't really confuse common interests with them being the same people. And I think like what we've recently seen coming out of the Taliban movement, they have actually stayed quite far away themselves, distanced themselves from the Al-Qaeda leadership and from various other elements that are running around in that border region.
In terms of that incentives issue, which I think is important, I don't get the sense anymore that the Taliban leadership, I mean, we're talking about the South here, it's a very heterogeneous movement. We can talk about every single region differently. But I don't think there's any sense anymore that they're going to take the country. I think one of the reasons why now is maybe the time to start talking, firstly, is everything takes a long time. But secondly, that I have a sense that having some kind of more inclusive relationship and inclusive part in terms of the politics and what's going on down in the south and edging up to the southeast and the southwest, this might be something that might be acceptable for them. That if there was some kind of local political process which could get started, then they would kind of...
They would accept a power sharing.
I think so, yeah.
I think when we talk about negotiation, I think we never really explained that, how we would see that. We would, like, in our point of view, negotiations, right now we have multi-level negotiations going on, and there are negotiations where the international community and the United States can have to have a place at the table and have to take a part of, and there are other negotiations where they definitely aren't. Right now, as we pointed out, like in southern Afghanistan, we really need to bring together the population with the government. We need to create something the Taliban actually would talk to, or would consider to be something that is legitimate, Right now we have a propped up government which would last as long as we have troops on the ground. The reason why we don't have a civil war currently is because we have foreign troops on the ground. So we have to negotiate on a regional level between parts of the population which are sitting on the fences, which are not part of the political process, and try to bring something to be or try to give something the room to grow, better to say, that is more representative on a regional level and a tribal level probably. These would be the guys who would be talking to the Taliban, because these would be the guys who speak the same language, who know each other since a long time, who have same cultural ties, and who actually know how to talk to each other and know how that works. We have very little idea how that actually works. Then, if we do that, we need to have national negotiations between the Pashtuns, the central government, and the various other actors within Afghanistan who probably are very threatened about that process, who wouldn't really know where this is going to. So you would have to talk to the Tajiks, the Hazaras, the Panjshiris, and all these other people who would be quite afraid. That's another point where we would have a place at the table, where probably the international community can help. And then you need to talk to the regional actors. You need to talk to Pakistan, you need to talk to Iran, you need to talk to India. Because all of these people also have a vital stake in what's going on, and I think the recent arrests actually point towards that people have a very big interest of what is going on and want to know what happens in Afghanistan, and also they need to be at some level addressed. And again, that's something where probably the United States needs to be leading.
We are talking about an extended process here.
No, it's not the flick switch and everything is going to be fine, unfortunately.
Yeah. 1 second, we can wait for the microphone. Sure.
My name is Amin Mahmoud. I'm with the Alliance of Egyptian American. My question is, as long as we have a collateral damages, means civilian death, and we know Taliban is Pashtun majority, and the number of Pashtun is very high. Talking to Pashtun individuals before, they said they will always looking for revenge because it's not acceptable what's going on. To negotiate is very hard. And one other question about Mullah Zaeef was very young when he joined, like 15-year-old, and then he's a mullah. I don't know all of these mullahs which religion
He's actually
study,
not a mullah.
how they get the title and what their background education religion-wise, because in my opinion is poor and need to know more in Islamic religion. Mm-hmm. That's the way I see it from the 90s.
You want to start in a second?
Like the reason why this book has its title Abdul Salam Zaeef, because we wanted it to be Mullah Abdul Salam Zaeef, but Abdul Salam Zaeef told us, I'm not a mullah yet, I have about 1.5 years left of studying before I can be Mullah Abdul Salam Zaeef. So he would very much agree with you, actually, on that. On the second part, there is kind of it's a cultural thing. A lot of people hold titles they're not holding. It's a matter of respect sometimes. There are people within the Taliban movement who probably didn't have the proper education, but there are other people who, like Mullah Zaeef, who see it exactly like you see it and say, like, I'm actually not a mullah, so everybody calls me a mullah, but I can't really write that on that book. That would be a lie. So
on this revenge issue, yes, it's. I think it's a motivating factor for some people, certainly, but I don't know if it's such a kind of a final fact, given the fact that lots and lots of people have been killed at various points. Then by that argument, there can be no solution because first everyone has to take revenge and then we get back to zero. I don't really see it that way, and